War is not only fought on beaches and battlefields, it is fought in shadows, in train yards, in basements, in whispered meetings and silent acts of defiance. These films reveal the real methods of wartime sabotage and resistance. Not heroic myths, but dangerous truths. Every wire cut, every train stopped, every choice fatal. Number 15, The Train, 1964. The Train is not a war movie about victory. It is a film about obstruction, delay, sabotage as survival. Inspired by real French resistance operations, this story focuses on one of the most effective wartime methods ever used against occupying forces: the destruction of logistics. Instead of attacking soldiers, the resistance attacks movement. Railway lines become the battlefield. Switches are damaged. Tracks are misaligned. Timetables are manipulated. Trains are stalled for hours or days while the enemy bleeds resources. The film accurately portrays how resistance fighters avoided open combat and instead used technical knowledge and patience to cripple German transport systems. What makes this depiction so authentic is its focus on consequences. Every act of sabotage risks exposure. Every delay increases suspicion. The resistance fighters are not portrayed as fearless heroes, but as exhausted workers who understand rail systems better than the men occupying them. This reflects real resistance doctrine. Use what you know, blend in, strike indirectly. The film also shows the moral tension behind sabotage. Destroying railways costs lives on both sides. Civilian workers are caught in the middle. Accidents are not always avoidable. This grim realism mirrors historical records from French resistance cells who understood that sabotage was effective but never clean. The Train presents resistance as labor, dirty, exhausting, and often thankless. It captures the true wartime method of turning infrastructure into a weapon without ever firing a gun. Number 14, Army of Shadows, 1969. Army of Shadows is not interested in spectacle. It is a manual of underground warfare disguised as cinema. Every scene reflects documented resistance procedures used across occupied Europe. False identities, compartmentalized cells, silent executions, couriers who know nothing beyond their task. The film depicts resistance as a system built on secrecy. Members do not ask questions. Names are withheld. Safe houses change constantly. Communication is indirect and coded. These were real methods taught by resistance leaders to prevent entire networks from collapsing under interrogation. One of the most chilling aspects is the portrayal of internal discipline. Traitors are eliminated not out of rage but necessity. The film shows how resistance groups carried out executions quietly, without witnesses, using methods designed to avoid noise and attention. These scenes are historically accurate and drawn from first-hand accounts. Sabotage here is not always explosive, it is informational. Delayed reports, misrouted intelligence, controlled leaks. Resistance is shown as patience rather than action. Waiting is often more dangerous than fighting. Army of Shadows refuses to romanticize its characters. Survival is temporary. Victory is uncertain. This aligns with historical reality. Most resistance fighters never saw liberation. They operated knowing capture was likely. The film remains one of the most authentic portrayals of how resistance truly functioned: cold, methodical, and built on sacrifice rather than glory. Number 13, The Battle of the Rails, 1946. The Battle of the Rails is not inspired by resistance history. It is resistance history. Made immediately after the war, the film features real railway workers who carried out actual sabotage operations during the occupation. They reenact their own methods on the same tracks they once destroyed. The sabotage techniques shown are precise and instructional. Rails are loosened just enough to derail trains at low speeds. Signals are altered to create collisions without obvious damage. Timetables are manipulated to cause massive logistical confusion. These were real techniques used to avoid mass civilian casualties while still crippling enemy supply lines. The film emphasizes coordination. Sabotage was rarely random. Operations were timed to coincide with troop movements and supply transfers. Resistance groups shared information through trusted intermediaries. Each action was calculated to maximize disruption while minimizing exposure. What sets this film apart is its focus on collective resistance. There are no central heroes. Entire communities participate. Railway workers, dispatchers, maintenance crews. Each person contributes a small action that compounds into catastrophic delays for the occupiers. The tone is documentary rather than dramatic. This reflects the mindset of real resistance fighters. They did not see themselves as legends. They saw themselves as workers doing necessary tasks. The Battle of the Rails remains one of the most accurate cinematic records of wartime sabotage ever produced. Number 12, Operation Daybreak. 1975. Operation Daybreak is one of the most precise cinematic reconstructions of an actual resistance assassination ever filmed. It documents the real Czech resistance operation that targeted Reinhard Heydrich, one of the most powerful figures in Nazi command. The methods shown are drawn directly from mission reports, survivor testimony, and post-war investigations. The film carefully explains preparation as the true weapon of resistance. Safe houses are rotated. Weapons are smuggled in pieces. Surveillance of daily routines takes weeks. The assassins study traffic patterns, crowd behavior, and escape routes. Nothing is rushed, because a single mistake would doom not just the operatives, but entire resistance networks. The assassination itself reflects historical accuracy rather than cinematic fantasy. Improvised explosives malfunction, guns jam, the plan nearly collapses. This chaos mirrors reality. Resistance operations rarely unfolded cleanly. They depended on adaptability rather than precision. What follows is equally important. The film depicts the brutal reprisals that resistance fighters fully expected. Entire neighborhoods are punished. Informants emerge under pressure. Safe houses fall one by one. This reflects the real strategic dilemma of resistance warfare. Every successful act carried catastrophic consequences for civilians. Operation Daybreak shows sabotage and assassination not as heroism, but as calculated sacrifice. The resistance knew survival was unlikely. Their goal was symbolic disruption and psychological impact. The film captures this grim truth without compromise, making it one of the most historically faithful resistance films ever produced. The number 11, The Heroes of Telmar, 1965. The Heroes of Telmar dramatizes one of the most successful sabotage missions of the Second World War, the destruction of Nazi heavy water production in Norway. This operation was not symbolic. It directly targeted Germany's potential nuclear research program using real sabotage techniques developed by Norwegian resistance fighters. The film accurately portrays terrain as a weapon. Saboteurs ski across frozen plateaus. They move silently through snowstorms. They exploit the enemy's unfamiliarity with the environment. These methods were not cinematic invention, but real resistance doctrine. Use geography to negate superior firepower. Sabotage here is surgical. Explosives are placed with precision to destroy equipment without triggering massive alarms. Escape routes are planned long before detonation. Communication is minimal to avoid interception. These details reflect declassified mission records almost exactly. The film also shows the resistance reliance on timing. Sabotage is synchronized with weather conditions, guard rotations, and supply deliveries. The resistance does not seek confrontation. They strike and disappear, knowing survival depends on remaining invisible. Perhaps most importantly, the film shows restraint. Civilian casualties are avoided at all costs. The resistance understands that legitimacy depends on protecting the population. This ethical calculation was central to real resistance movements. The Heroes of Telmar stands as a rare example of a sabotage film where the mission mattered strategically. It demonstrates how resistance warfare could alter the course of global conflict through precise targeted action. Number 10, Flame and Citron, 2008. Flame and Citron exposes the darkest side of resistance warfare. Based on real Danish resistance assassins, this film explores how sabotage operations evolved into targeted killings sanctioned by underground leadership. Every method shown is drawn from court records, resistance archives, and first-hand testimony. The assassinations are methodical. Targets are confirmed through multiple sources. Surveillance is constant. Escape plans are rehearsed. Weapons are selected for concealment rather than firepower. These were real tactics designed to eliminate collaborators without drawing public attention. What makes the film devastating is its focus on uncertainty. Intelligence is often incomplete. Orders come through intermediaries. Resistance fighters are never fully sure whether their targets are traitors or victims of misinformation. This reflects the historical reality of underground warfare where false intelligence could be fatal. The film also explores internal sabotage. Resistance groups deliberately disrupt German administration by eliminating informants, corrupt officials, and collaborators. This creates paranoia within occupation forces and slows decision-making. These psychological sabotage methods were just as important as physical attacks. Flame and Citron refuses to glorify its protagonists. The emotional toll is immense. Trust erodes. Moral lines blur. This aligns with historical accounts of resistance members who struggled with guilt long after the war. By focusing on assassination as a wartime method rather than action spectacle, the film reveals the true cost of resistance. Victory came at a psychological price few were prepared to pay. Number 9, The Counterfeiters, 2007. The Counterfeiters reveals a form of resistance rarely shown on screen: economic sabotage from inside the enemy system. Based on a true Nazi operation to flood Allied economies with forged currency, the film focuses on prisoners forced to produce perfect counterfeits. Their resistance lies not in explosions, but in precision failure. The sabotage methods depicted are subtle and historically accurate. Printing plates are damaged microscopically. Ink mixtures are altered just enough to fail quality checks. Production schedules are slowed through deliberate inefficiency. These acts were nearly impossible to detect and incredibly dangerous. Any mistake risked immediate execution. What makes this resistance unique is its invisibility. There are no weapons, no uniforms, only technical expertise turned against the occupier. The film shows how skilled labor became a battleground where knowledge itself was weaponized. This reflects real wartime sabotage doctrine: destroy systems from within rather than attack them directly. The moral complexity is central. Saboteurs must balance resistance against survival. Slowing production too much draws suspicion. Sabotaging too effectively could lead to brutal reprisals against fellow prisoners. This constant calculation mirrors survivor testimony from the real operation. The Counterfeiters demonstrates that resistance did not always look heroic. Sometimes it looked like compliance hiding defiance. By focusing on economic warfare, the film expands the definition of sabotage beyond violence into intelligence craftsmanship and quiet rebellion. Number 8. Black Book, 2006. Black Book portrays resistance through infiltration, identity theft, intelligence manipulation, and emotional endurance. Based on real Dutch resistance methods, the film follows operatives who survived by becoming ghosts, changing names, altering appearances, moving through enemy ranks unnoticed. The sabotage shown is informational rather than explosive. False intelligence is planted. Trust is exploited. Bureaucratic systems are manipulated to misdirect investigations. These methods were widely used by resistance networks to slow enemy responses and expose collaborators. One of the most accurate elements is the depiction of forged documents. Papers are not just props, they are lifelines. The film shows how resistance cells maintained printing networks and authentication methods to keep false identities believable. This was one of the most dangerous resistance roles since a single error could unravel entire networks. Black Book also emphasizes psychological sabotage. The occupier is fed conflicting information. Internal rivalries are encouraged, paranoia spreads. This soft sabotage weakened enemy control without direct confrontation. The film refuses simplicity. Resistance fighters are forced to cooperate with compromised officials and make morally ambiguous decisions. This reflects historical reality where purity was impossible under occupation. By focusing on infiltration, Black Book demonstrates that resistance warfare depended on adaptability. The most effective weapon was not a gun, but the ability to disappear in plain sight. Number 7. This Land Is Mine, 1943. This Land Is Mine presents resistance as civilian defiance rather than organized warfare. Based on real experiences from occupied Europe, the film focuses on psychological resistance, education, speech, and refusal to comply. The sabotage methods here are quiet but powerful. Teachers alter lessons to preserve forbidden history. Citizens refuse to repeat propaganda. Small acts of non-compliance accumulate into widespread disruption of occupation authority. These methods were documented across multiple occupied nations where open resistance was impossible. The film accurately portrays how fear governs occupation. Surveillance is constant. Informants are everywhere. Resistance therefore becomes internal. Thoughts guarded, words measured. Silence itself becomes sabotage. What makes this portrayal authentic is its emphasis on moral courage. Resistance is shown as a daily choice rather than a single act. Standing firm in public, refusing to sign false statements. These actions carried severe consequences, including imprisonment or execution. This Land Is Mine also shows how symbolic acts inspire broader resistance. A single speech, a classroom lesson, a refusal to kneel. These moments mattered because they reminded civilians they were not alone. The film expands the definition of sabotage beyond physical damage. It shows how maintaining identity, culture, and truth undermine the occupier's long-term control. Resistance here is endurance, and endurance itself becomes a weapon. Number 6. The Night of the Generals, 1967. The Night of the Generals explores resistance through intelligence sabotage and internal decay within the Nazi command structure. While structured as a mystery, the film is rooted in documented resistance methods that focused on exposing corruption and destabilizing leadership from within. The sabotage here is indirect. Intelligence is leaked strategically. Investigations are stalled or redirected. conflicting orders are allowed to circulate unchecked. These methods were used by resistance sympathizers inside occupied administrations to weaken operational cohesion without revealing their allegiance. The film accurately depicts how information became a weapon. Resistance networks understood that destroying trust inside enemy ranks could paralyze entire units. When officers suspected each other, discipline collapsed, decisions slowed, resources were misallocated. This psychological sabotage proved as effective as explosives. The narrative also reflects historical cases where resistance groups exploited crimes committed by occupying officers. Rather than conceal atrocities, they amplified them through clandestine channels, forcing internal inquiries and power struggles. This weakened command authority and diverted attention from frontline operations. What makes the film notable is its restraint. Resistance fighters are rarely visible. Their presence is felt through confusion and delay. This reflects real intelligence warfare where success meant remaining invisible. The Night of the Generals demonstrates that sabotage did not always involve physical destruction. Sometimes it meant letting the enemy destroy itself. By exposing cracks within authoritarian systems, resistance fighters could accelerate collapse without firing a shot. Number 5. Hangmen Also Die, 1943. Hangmen Also Die dramatizes resistance assassination and its aftermath through methods closely aligned with real wartime practices. Loosely inspired by Operation Anthropoid, the film depicts how resistance fighters prepared for reprisals as part of their strategy rather than as an afterthought. The assassination itself reflects historical limitations. Weapons are scarce. Plans rely on proximity and timing rather than firepower. Escape routes are improvised. These realities mirror actual resistance operations where precision mattered more than strength. The most authentic aspect lies in the response. The film shows how resistance networks deliberately manipulate reprisals. False leads are planted. Decoy suspects are offered. Community solidarity protects operatives. These tactics were used to prevent the occupier from identifying real perpetrators. Psychological sabotage is central. The resistance exploits the occupier's need for public punishment. By controlling the narrative, they turn fear against the enemy. This tactic forced occupying forces into increasingly brutal actions that eroded civilian cooperation. The film also emphasizes collective resistance. Civilians act together to hide fighters and mislead investigators. This reflects historical truth. Resistance rarely survived without community support. Hangmen Also Die presents sabotage as layered warfare. One act of violence triggers a chain of deception, misdirection, and endurance. It captures the brutal reality that resistance success was measured not by survival, but by disruption. Number 4. Defiance, 2008. Defiance shifts the focus from urban resistance to partisan warfare rooted in survival sabotage. Based on real Jewish partisan groups, the film depicts how isolated fighters disrupted German operations through constant small-scale interference rather than decisive battles. Sabotage methods include ambushes, supply theft, infrastructure damage, and intelligence gathering. These actions are historically accurate and documented across Eastern European partisan movements. The goal was not victory, but exhaustion. Wear the enemy down. Force them to commit resources to remote areas. The film shows how resistance adapted to terrain. Forests became shields. Camps moved constantly. Fire was hidden. Tracks were erased. These survival tactics were essential to avoiding detection and maintaining long-term resistance. What makes Defiance authentic is its emphasis on logistics. Food, ammunition, shelter. Every resource is contested. Sabotage often involved stealing rather than destroying. Supply raids kept fighters alive while denying resources to the occupier. The film also explores moral leadership. Resistance here is about protecting civilians rather than achieving military glory. This aligns with historical accounts where partisan groups measured success by lives saved. Defiance portrays resistance as endurance under impossible conditions. Sabotage is slow grinding and relentless. It reveals how sustained disruption rather than dramatic strikes weakened occupation forces over time. Number 3. A Man Escaped, 1956. A Man Escaped is one of the most precise cinematic depictions of resistance through incarceration sabotage. Based on real memoirs, the film documents how prisoners used patience observation and improvised tools to undermine an enemy prison system from the inside. The sabotage methods are small but relentless. Screws are loosened incrementally. Wooden doors are scraped hollow over weeks. Guards' routines are memorized down to the minute. Noise is masked by coinciding movements. These techniques were standard among resistance prisoners who understood that escape was an act of warfare, not desperation. The film accurately portrays time as the greatest weapon. There is no rush. Each act is delayed until it can be hidden. This mirrors real resistance doctrine inside prisons, where survival depended on blending resistance into routine. What makes the film authentic is its emphasis on discipline. Emotion is suppressed. Trust is tested slowly. Information is shared only when necessary. This compartmentalization prevented entire cells from collapsing if one prisoner was caught. A Man Escaped demonstrates that sabotage does not require violence. It requires precision and endurance. Every step toward freedom weakens the occupier's control and proves that domination is never total. The film captures resistance as quiet, unstoppable persistence. Number 2. The Sorrow and the Pity, 1969. The Sorrow and the Pity exposes resistance by dismantling myth. Through interviews and archival material, it documents how sabotage actually functioned across occupied France. Not as universal heroism, but as fragmented, risky, and morally complex resistance. The documentary details real sabotage methods, railway disruptions, intelligence leaks, forged documents, civilian noncompliance. Each method is contextualized within fear, collaboration, and survival. This realism is critical because it reflects how resistance varied by region, class, and circumstance. One of its most powerful contributions is showing resistance hesitation. Many civilians waited. Some collaborated. Sabotage often occurred late and cautiously. This contradicts heroic narratives but aligns with historical records. The film also explores how resistance depended on opportunity. Sabotage increased when Allied momentum shifted. This reflects real strategic calculation rather than spontaneous rebellion. By presenting resistance without romantic framing, the documentary reveals its true nature. Risk layered upon fear. Courage mixed with compromise. Sabotage was never pure, but it was real. The Sorrow and the Pity functions as a corrective. It shows resistance not as legend, but as lived history shaped by human limits. That honesty makes it one of the most important resistance films ever made. Number 1. Casablanca, 1942. Casablanca may appear romantic, but beneath its surface lies a remarkably accurate portrayal of resistance logistics, escape networks, forged papers, transit routes, and controlled neutrality, all based on real wartime methods used across occupied territories. The film shows how resistance relied on bottlenecks, visas, stamps, exit permits. These bureaucratic tools became weapons. Whoever controlled paperwork controlled survival. Resistance networks forged documents and manipulated officials to move targets through hostile territory. Casablanca also captures the importance of neutral zones. Cities like Casablanca functioned as liminal spaces where resistance operatives could operate quietly. These hubs were essential to smuggling people and information out of Europe. The sabotage here is subtle. Delay paperwork, redirect attention, exploit greed and corruption. These methods were widely used because they avoided direct confrontation. What elevates the film is its understanding of moral choice. Resistance often meant choosing who could be saved. Not everyone made it out. This harsh truth defined real resistance logistics. Casablanca endures because it understands resistance as infrastructure. Not guns, but systems. And systems could be broken quietly from within. Resistance was never loud. It lived in patience, deception, and endurance. These films reveal how ordinary people disrupted extraordinary tyranny using real methods drawn from history. Sabotage was not about destruction alone, it was about survival, memory, and the refusal to disappear.